All right, welcome back to the channel. I'm actually doing this by request. Not entirely sure what's going to happen in this, but the idea is if you're doing a multiplayer game that has lots of collectibles in the scene, but it's randomized each match, how do you do that without making the scene take forever to load? So I have some ideas on how to do that, and we're going to see if it works. I have no idea. I haven't even tried it yet. We're going to be doing pooling and sending RPCs to the other players that join. So let's see what happens. All right, so we need a bazillion objects. I'm going to collapse this game window a bit. All right, here's the scene. So we have this huge play space. It's 100 meters by 100 meters. And we need to figure out how we're going to organize a ton of different game objects here in this scene. So my one thought is pooling. Okay, anytime you're dealing with lots of objects that need to be created and moved and destroyed, pooling's the way to go. So where you're not actually deactivating and activating or instantiating any objects, but you're just moving them around. The other thing I thought about is even though Unity has like occlusion culling and the camera culls some things automatically, we can set up our own kind of thing to where when a player enters a zone, the pool kind of moves. Don't know if that's going to work, but let's see what happens. So we have this pretty huge space. So let's create some zones. So I'm going to create a just a cube. And I need some materials for this. I don't know. Do I have materials? I don't seem to have a materials folder. All right, so let's create one. Create folder, materials. And I'm going to create a new folder in here. Let's call this zone materials. And let's create a material. And I'm going to make it yellow. And I'm also going to make it transparent. My yellow didn't save. And let's make it transparent. Okay. And let's call this yellow. Yellow zone. Boom. All right, so there's our yellow zone. And let's go ahead and zero that back out. So here it is in the center of our world. All right. But I'm going to go snap it over into the corner. So I'm just going to hold V and try to grab a corner, and boom, snapped over there kind of automatically. And if my world's 100 by 100 by 100, let's scale this zone to 25. All right. No, it needs to be 50. No, it needs to be, does it need to be 100? No, 50 is good. Okay. So now let's grab our corner and put it there. All right. So this is going to be zone 1. And let's go ahead and put a little label on this. And we're going to call this zone 1. And we turn my gizmos on. There we have zone 1. Okay. And let's duplicate this. And we have zone 2. And let's get a new color. Create. All right, so we have our zones. Maybe I don't need them as tall. Let's move them, scale these back to like 10. And then grab that corner, snap it down. All right, there's our zones. You know what? I don't even want them that tall. Because they're just kind of labeling the zones for us visually. So let's make this even, let's just make it 1. 1 should be good, I think. All right, so move them a little bit. Then I can grab the corner and snap it down. All right, cool. Ooh, what happened to those guys? Apparently, zone 1 and 2 got out of place. So V, there. Cool. All right, so there we have our zones. And so now I want to have a gazillion spawn points. All right, let's pause on that right now. So the next thing we're going to move on to a pooler. So what is a pooler? A pooler is a way to reuse a bunch of game objects. So you may not know this, but in like games with guns, when you see bullet holes in the walls, those bullet holes aren't being created. They actually start out active in the scene, and they just get set invisible, and their position just gets set to change because activating game objects, deactivating game objects, creating game objects, destroying game objects, it's very performance heavy. But making them visible and invisible and changing their position, not so performance heavy. So it's the whole reason that we're doing this. I'm just going to reset the position on this, and I'm just going to call this pooler. All right, and so we need some collectibles. So I'm just going to create a sphere. And let's put, we'll just call this collectible. And let's put a material on it. I don't know what's a good color that's going to stand out. Let's just make it black. That'll stand out. Okay. So if we zoom in, there we have our sphere. But I want to move it up. 1.5 probably. All right, so that's going to be our collectible. All right, and maybe it could be an enemy or whatever. Anything that we need to reuse a bunch of different times. So what's the maximum that I want to be in my scene? In order to do that, I just decide that on my own. So since I'm choosing in each of my zones 20 random points, let's have 20 random collectibles. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Good. All right, so I have 20 of those. But I'm going to take them all, and I am going to make them invisible. All right, and I'm going to turn off their collider. And for this case, I would probably have these be triggers. They're collectibles. Okay. Keep in mind, for triggers and collision events, you need to have a rigid body on one of the objects colliding. But our player is going to have a rigid body, probably. We'd have to go that route. We don't want 100 items with rigid bodies in our scene. All right, so there's our pooler. We have all of our zones. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an FSM that's actually going to be shared by all 4 of these zones. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and right click and save this as a template. And I'm just going to call this random spawn template. And yes, I'm going to use it here. All right, so I can go ahead and copy this component and I can put it in all my other zones. All right, so 2 episodes ago, I did an episode on FSM templates, and we're using that skill even more right now. So what's happening is because this is a template, when I click here and edit this FSM, it's going to edit it for all 4 objects. So we need some things here because what we want to do is we have this pooler of collectibles that we want to spawn randomly in each zone. So we need to set up some variables. So we need some random floats. We need a minimum X value and a maximum X value, minimum Z value, maximum Z value. Okay, so we're going to do X min, X max, Z min, and Z max. All right, but each of these values is going to be different for all 4 zones. So I want to make all of these inputs so I can change them depending on the game object that's using them. All right. I also need to be able to reference this pooler. So I can either make it a global variable or I can just put it in here as a game object and drop it in on each one. And I'm just going to make it a game object and drop it in on each one. So like if I come here, I can see there's my pooler. So I can drop my pooler in there. And 2, drop my pooler in there. And 3, drop my pooler in there. 4, drop my pooler in there. All right. So for zone 1, we need to look at this like a typical 2D graph. So I actually need to flip around here. All right, because here is our, and here you can see the globals. Our X positive is in the forward direction. Our X Z positive is, or our Z positive is in the left direction. So that means zone 4 is positive, positive. Zone 3 is negative, positive. Zone 2 is positive, negative. And zone 1 is negative, negative. All right, so for zone 1, our X minimum, I measured this before. Each of these cubes is 50 by 50. So the X minimum is going to be minus 50. The maximum is 0, which is our origin point. And the Z minimum is also going to be minus 50. And the maximum is the origin point. On zone 2, Z is actually positive to the left of the, and you kind of see it right here where it's transformed. As you can see, the Z is positive, the X is negative. So the X can go from 0 to negative 25. And the Z can go from 0 to positive 25. Zone 3, we have X is now in the positive, but it's on the negative side of Z. So Z min is going to be minus 50. It's maximum 0. The X minimum is 0 with a positive 50. And if we go to zone 4, they're both positive. So the maximum 50, minimum 0, maximum 50, minimum 0. Okay, so now that we have those set up on each one, what are we going to do with it? So on the start state, what we want to do is we need to store some points that will get used for this whole scene. Because if we're doing a a multiplayer arena game where you're trying to collect all these collectibles before the other team, everybody needs to have the collectibles in the same spot. So we need to make sure that we know where those collectibles are at all times. So we are going to get random float. That's what we want. And so we're going to, and so this is going to be for our X. So our X min to our X max. I'm going to store this as X random. And we do the same thing for our Z's. Copy paste. Z minimum, Z maximum. So we have a random X and we have a random Z. Our Y is always going to be at 0.5 because that's where the pivot point is in our collectibles. But what we could do is we could kind of, we could still set up a variable. So that we can just call our Y point. And we can make that input. That way, if the zones have different sized collectibles, their pivot point might need to be at a different location. But I'm just going to come out here now and make my Y point 0.5 on all of these because I'm using the same mesh on all of them. All right, so I have an X, I have a Z, and now I want to set vector 3xyz. And we're just going to call this random vector 3. And our X is going to be our X random, our Y is going to be our Y point, and our Z is going to be our, we didn't set the variable, Z random. And so once we have that point, I need to add it to an array. So I'm going to do array add. So we need to create an array. So let's come over here. And we want a new array. And we're going to call this our random points array. And these are going to be vector 3s. So we can go back to our state, random points array, and we're going to store our random vector 3 that we've just created. And then I want to do this 20 times. So I need a way to do that. So I'm going to do int add. And we're just going to call this iteration, our int variable, iteration. I want to add 1. Then I'm going to do an int compare that I'm going to put at the top of this state. And I want to compare the iteration to 20. Okay, so if the iteration has gotten to 20, that means it's already done this 20 times. So if it's equal, I want to call this just done. Also, if it's greater than, make it done, just in case it gets greater than. All right. And then I'm just going to add a finish state for it to loop. And we'll move done over here. So let's just see that that works. I'm going to hit play. All right, so if we go over here into our variables, we can see that we have 20 vector 3s. And we should have that for every single one of our zones. In fact, to make it easier to see in the inspector, we could make our array an output. And now if we hit play, there's our array in zone 1, our array in zone 2, our array in zone 3, and array in zone 4. So these are going to be location points for our collectibles. All right, so I have our collectibles here in this pooler. And so I need to, now that I have my create random points, I need to do something with those points. So now I want to wait for player to enter. So we're going to do a trigger event. The collide tag needs to be a player. Send event. Player entered. So now we need to make all the collectibles move to this zone and be visible. So get next child. And we're going to specify the game object, and it's going to be our pooler. Store the child as child. All right, so once we have the child, we need to do something with it in the loop. So we have the child. Now we're going to make the game object visible. And another thing we need to do is we need to activate the collider. Because right now I have the collider not activated. We need to go in here. We need to set component. Component. I don't want to get the component. I want to set the component. No, I need to get the component first and then set the property. So I need to get the component, specify the game object of the child, and we want to store the component, but we need to know what the component type is first. So we need a new object type, and we're going to call this collider. And we need to come back here to object, and we need to search for U to go to Unity. I think it's Unity Engine. And in this case, it's a sphere collider. Right there. All right. So we know that the collider is a sphere collider type. So now I should be able to store the component collider and set the property of the collider to enabled. I swear there's an action that allows you to disable colliders. It's got to be collider That's weird. Swore I had found one. All right, so we're making the not the owner. We're making the child visible. And we're checking if it's visible. That's not what we want to do. Visible. Game object is it's checking set visibility. Jeez. All right. That's the one we wanted. Not game object is visible. Set visibility of the child to visible. Don't want to reset on exit. And then we're going to get the child's collider. And we're going to enable checkbox that collider. And then we're going to set position of that child to our random vector 3 in the world. Make visible set position is what this state's going to be. And then we're going to finish that and go back to get the next child. And when it's finished, we do this finished event. Let's see how that works. But again, it's not going to do anything until the player enters. So let's hit play. And we can go look in the scene. Let's go ahead and zoom into zone 1. You know what I'm also going to do for all these zones is I'm going to go ahead and turn off those renderers. All right, make it a little bit easier for us to see. So now if I go to zone 1, we're waiting for the player to enter. So I can fake that by going to the next state by just holding Alt and click on the next state. And we entered the next state, but I'm only seeing one, and it doesn't look like the position changed of any of our collectibles. They're all in the same spot. So what happened? Set position of the child to, the last vector 3 that was created is what we used. So we need to we don't want to get the next child yet. Before that, I want to get next random point. Or array point, get next array point. All right, so array get next. So in our random points array, we want to do the whole thing. Loop event, we can just use loop again. Let's get our player entered to go here. Let's just move these two over. All right, so I'm not actually going to finish from there. I want this to be the last thing. Because it's going to be the array that determines when we're done, not the how many children are in the pooler. And so we're going to get to the next child. But we need to store that as the random vector 3. All right, so whatever next child or the next array it gets, it's going to store that as a random vector 3. And then it should get it, and hopefully everything works. So let's try this again. Oh, I must have disabled the... I'm going to go ahead and turn those mesh renderers off again. Zone 1. All right, we're waiting for the player to enter. I'm just going to hold Alt and skip to that state. I messed something else up. All right, so once we get to the next child, we're going to set its position. And when this one finishes, we need to go over there. We need to go back to the array state, not back to the child state. And I'm going to, before I do that again, I'm going to make those mesh renderers not visible. And let's try third time's the charm. All right, we are waiting for the player. Boom, ran everything. Let's see if it worked. Scene view. Not bad. Look at those random game objects. Okay, so if I look at, if I re-enable zone 1, you'll see that all of those collectibles are in zone 1. Fantastic. So what happens if I'm in zone 2? I was in zone 1, and now I'm going to move to, actually, more fun is going to be zone 4. All right, so there I am, all the players in zone 1, so all the collectibles are there. But let's say they move to zone 4. I don't want to create new collectibles. Instead, I want to move all of those to zone 4. So let's pretend I moved to zone 4 by alt-clicking on the next state. And bing, bada, boom. All those collectibles are now in zone 4. You can see it didn't take anything to change their positions, and now they're in zone 4. So I think this bit has been longer than I expected. I think we'll pause here, and we'll do, in the next episode, we'll show you, the next things we need to do is what happens if one of these game objects is destroyed. And then how do we tell, because the host is creating all these random points, we need all the new players that join to learn where these new points are. So that will be what we do in the next episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.